The main thing that sets Brakence's production apart, besides his granular synthesis, is his use of Midwest emo and math rock guitar riffs. And to be honest, there aren't a ton of loop kits on the market in these genres since they're relatively niche. So if you want to integrate Midwest emo or math rock guitar riffs into your beats, your best bet is just to learn how to play them. And don't worry if you're not good at guitar, this is one of the first genres I learned how to make, and it's incredibly beginner friendly. So grab your guitar and follow along, because today we're going over literally everything, including the guitar setup, classic Midwest emo tunings, chord progressions, playing techniques, the recording process, mixing with amp sims, and finally, chopping up your guitars to give them that glitchy, Brakence-inspired sound. But before we get into the tutorial, I want to give a quick shout out to Xvive Audio, the sponsor of today's video, and actually the first sponsor I've ever brought onto the channel. Over the past couple of months, I've had a bunch of companies reach out to me regarding sponsorships. But honestly, most of them just didn't align with what I do here. Whether it was use of AI and music softwares, products that didn't make sense for music producers, or just things that didn't fit the vibe of the channel, I always passed. But Xvive Audio was different. Their A58 wireless guitar system is something I actually use and genuinely improves my workflow. If you don't know, it's a compact wireless transmitter and receiver setup for your guitar, bass, or any other instrument that has a quarter jack. It gives you a clean wireless connection with zero noticeable latency, which is huge for me when laying down guitars in my DAW. As instead of being locked into one spot or getting tangled in cables, I can move around freely within my room. I can go and sit on that bed, I can go and sit on my couch, hell, I can go to the bathroom. It works up to 100 feet. Point is, you're not boxed in while you're making music. So if you like to incorporate live instruments into your beats or just want to jam out more freely, check out the A58 wireless guitar system. Huge thanks to Xvive Audio for supporting the channel and being the first ever sponsor I've actually felt good about working with. The link's in the description if you want to check this bad boy out. I heavily recommend it. But with that being said, let's get into the first aspect of making Midwest emo loops in the style of Brakence, and that is the guitar setup. And to follow along with this tutorial, you're only going to need 4 things: a guitar, a pick, a capo, and a way to record your guitars. As for which guitar you should be using, it doesn't really matter. Though a staple in Midwest emo is the Telecaster, but I've made 3 Midwest emo kits over the years and I've used 3 different guitars and they all sound really good. For the first one, I used a like $100 Stratocaster with like 2-year-old strings. For the second kit, I used this bad boy, which is a bottom of the line Squier Telecaster. I think this was like 180 bucks, if that. And for my third kit, I used a Jackson 7-string with humbucker pickups. Point is, you could really use any kind of guitar that you have, as we're mainly aiming for a clean signal. Now, as for a way to record your guitars, you could either record straight from an amp or just plug your guitar in directly into your interface. On top of that, I like to record at a lower volume just to ensure that there's no clipping when I'm recording and there's not going to be any headroom issues. And now the final thing I want to mention for the setup is your knobs and your pickup switch. My personal preference is having both the knobs turned up all the way, both the tone and the volume. And as for the pickup switch, it's pretty standard to have it in the middle position for Midwest emo. So now with that being said, let's get into the next aspect of making Midwest emo loops, which is the classic tunings. And there's going to be a little bit of a shift in the mic quality because I'm going to be using my ground camera to display this. And for my Midwest emo loops, I like to make use of 2 different tunings. The first of which is going to be D-A-E, A-C sharp E. And this is what that one sounds like. Essentially, this is an open tuning playing an open A add 4 chord. And if you're not using a capo, this tuning is standardly in A major. Now, one thing I like about this tuning is the octave half-step intervals. On your 4th and 5th fret, on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th string, there are these half-step intervals that just go up by fifths and octaves. And those are perfect for playing quick little flares right next to each other. It just makes it so much easier. Now, the second tuning that I like to make use of is going to be FACGCE. This tuning is an open F major 9 chord, and the scale it's playing is C major. Now, similarly to D-A-E, A-C sharp E, on the 4th and 5th fret, we have those octave intervals. But instead of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th string, it's going to be the 3rd, 4th, and 5th string. And this is why Midwest emo is so beginner friendly, as tunings like these make it really easy to play difficult sounding melodies. Now, one thing I recommend is using a capo to work in different scales. So in FACGCE with no capo, we're in C major. But if I put a capo on the 5th fret, now we're in F major, giving it a completely different sound. Now, one tip that I have if you're using capos is to tune up to your capo. So you're gonna tune your guitar to FAC GCE, but once you put your capo on, you might be slightly out of tune, so just be sure to retune it. Not to FAC GCE, but you're gonna transpose it however many semitones up it is. So instead of tuning my lowest string to F, since we're going up by 5 semitones, I tune it to A sharp. So yeah, that's gonna completely cover the tunings that I use. So let's get into the next aspect, which is chord progressions. And chord progressions in both of these tunings have a very similar formula. So first I'm gonna cover FAC GCE, since that's just the tuning that I'm in. And when I say chord progressions, I'm mainly referring to the bass lines that they're playing. Since these are open tunings, you can get really lush chords by only having 1 or 2 fingers on the frets. So with that being said, the chord progressions that I like to make use of are going to be the 0 to the 4, the 0 to the 4 to the 2, the 0 to the 7, the 0 to the 4 to the 7, as well as the 0, 4, 7, 2. Pretty much any kind of combination with the 0, 4, 2, and 7 is going to give you a good sound and is going to lend itself well to the chord progression tip I'm going to cover. And that is with whatever note you're playing on your lowest string for the bass line, you're going to take your second finger and place it 2 strings directly below. So if I'm playing a 2 on the bass line, I'm going to play on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And if you want to make your chords more unique, you can integrate your 3rd finger. More often than not, if you integrate your 3rd finger on the 5th string, it's going to sound good on the exact same fret as all the other ones. And if it doesn't sound good on that fret, push it 1 fret forward. Now that's for FAC GCE, but a similar rule applies to D, A, E, A, C sharp, E. Instead of putting your 2nd finger 2 strings below your bass line, you're just gonna put it 1 string below. And the same rule applies for your 3rd finger. You can just put it on the same fret or the fret in front of it. So that's going to completely cover chord progressions. In these tunings, they are very, very simple. So now let's get into the next and most fun aspect of making Midwest emo loops, and that is the playing techniques. And there are 5 different playing techniques I like to make use of when making my Midwest emo loops. The first of which is going to be slides. So instead of playing 2 notes like this, you could integrate slides by doing it like this. So instead of picking on both of them, you just pick on the first one and let the sustain do the work. This is really good for keeping your picking hand less busy, especially if you're doing really complicated patterns. The second technique I like to make use of are going to be pull-offs. So when you play a note, you're gonna pluck the string with your left hand, like this. And this is really good to use in tandem with slides. Now, the third technique that I like to make use of are going to be hammer-ons. And these are especially useful in these little half-step intervals I mentioned earlier. So essentially what a hammer-on is you'll play 1 note and then hammer your finger onto another fret. And something I like to do for this is make the hammer-on really quick, like this, and pair it with a pull-off. Now, the fourth technique that I like to make use of are going to be bends. And yet again, these are going to be easiest in these little half-step intervals, as bending between a half-step is much less laborious than bending a whole step. So all you'll do is you'll play a note and then bend downward towards your highest string. And yet again, this is something that I like to use in tandem with pull-offs. And now the fifth and final technique that I'll make use of in my Midwest emo loops is going to be natural harmonics. And your natural harmonics can be found on your 12th, 7th, and 5th fret. And to play natural harmonics, you're going to lightly rest your finger on the string. Don't push it down, just lightly rest it there. And you want your finger to be right above the fret, not in the middle of it, but right above it. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna pluck your string, and as soon as you pluck it, lift your finger off. It gives it a bit of a like bell or mallet kind of sound. And this is very commonly used in Midwest emo. Now you could either pluck individual notes like I just did, or you could place your finger on the whole fret and do it like that. And all the 5 techniques that I mentioned right now are pretty much used in every single Midwest emo loop that I make. I bunch them all together just to make them super interesting and complicated. So now that we've covered the playing techniques, let's take it into the DAW to go over the recording process. All right, so the first thing you'll notice when looking at my recordings is that they are separated. Now, I like to not only do this for mixing purposes, but also just convenience. Some people may call it cheating, but you could either take 30 minutes making the loop and comping the guitar, or you could spend an hour and a half or 2 hours trying to get that one recording right. And the final product is pretty much gonna sound the same anyways. So if you're focused on really honing in your guitar skills and cracking down and being really, really good at guitar, you could try to record it all in one take. But if you're a beginner guitarist or just looking for convenience, don't feel ashamed to separate them out. And I like to record 3 different types of stems. The first of which is going to be the bass line. I like to have this separate not only for mixing purposes, but also for whoever uses these loops. It's going to be much easier to find the notes that the bass line play when the bass line is isolated on its own. The second section that I like to record is my main melody. This is what's making use of all of those guitar techniques that I covered, all those slides, the hammer-ons, the pull-offs, all that kind of stuff. This is the main meat of our melody. And the third thing that I like to record is going to be harmonies. Now, this is completely optional, but I find that they really spice up your melodies and make them sound much more interesting. So for your harmonies, just play notes on higher strings in tandem with your main melody, just playing similar rhythms and similar techniques, and find notes that mesh well with your main melody. And one thing I make sure of every single time when recording my guitars is that this 3-2-1 countdown is off. This is because if you start right at the 3-2-1, the note that you play might be slightly before it and it'll cut it off. So I just have that buffer at the beginning act as my countdown and then play a bar afterwards. That way I'm not cutting out any kind of like initial transients or anything like that. So now that we've covered the recording process, let's get into a very important aspect of making these loops, which is post-processing and other effects. Now, the first thing outside of the mixer channel that I like to make use of is going to be some kind of time stretcher to make sure all my notes are in time. And luckily, FL Studio has a native time shifter. So if you double click on any of your waveforms, right-click the actual waveform and hit open in Time Warper, it'll pull up new time, and in there you can quantize your notes. So all you'll do is hit Control A to select them all, and then hit Control Q to quantize them. And you'll want to scan through and make sure the notes are playing the rhythm they're actually supposed to be playing, as sometimes it's not 100% accurate when you just quantize it off the jump. But yeah, once you have it quantized, you can just hit this button right here, and it'll bring it into your playlist. The second thing that I'll do outside of my mixer channel is I'll pitch up my guitar recordings if I want them to have a different sound. Sometimes pitching them up by like 3 to 500 cents can give them a more twinkly and bright sound. But it's completely optional. It's all just up to your personal preference. So now let's get into the actual mixing of the guitars. The first thing I'll throw down before anything else is just going to be a standard compressor. You could use FL Studio's native compressor, you can use FabFilter Pro C, you can use anything, as long as you're getting something to tame those peaks. The second thing that I'll throw down to support that compressor is a limiter. I just like to do this because it's easier for me to visualize those peaks when they're right in front of me, and it also tames anything that the compressor might have missed. Now, the third and most important effect that I'll throw down is going to be some kind of guitar amp simulator. I like to make use of archetype Corey Wong, and my favorite preset on this for Midwest Emo is going to be the Clean as a Whistle preset. But there are plenty of other amp sim VSTs out there. Like one that I hear is really, really good is Guitar Rig 7, but I really like the clean presets in archetype Corey Wong. On top of that, since guitar recordings are relatively thin, I'll throw down some kind of widener to spread it out and make it sound a bit more full. And finally, these last couple of things are optional, but I throw down Soothe too to tame any kind of harsh or resonant frequencies, as well as an EQ to take out some of those low ends, and a mid-side EQ to make those low to low mids mono. I don't know if this is a problem with my guitars or this is just common with recording, but sometimes those low notes will sound super dissonant with the main melody, and I find that making them mono with a mid-side EQ helps it wonderfully. So with that being said, without any of those effects, this is what the guitar sounds like. And with the effects, this is what it sounds like. In terms of mastering, the only thing that I'll throw down is some kind of tape emulator. This is completely optional, but I find that it gives your guitar a much more warm and full sound. And finally, since we cut out those low ends of the guitar, I'll throw in some kind of acoustic bass following the bass line. And it doesn't even need to be anything crazy. I'm just using a free bass from Spitfire Labs. So now that we've covered post-processing and effects, let's get into chopping up this guitar and giving it that Brakence glitchy inspired sound. And I'll achieve this in two different ways. The first way is making use of Time Shaper LFO plugins like Shaperbox or Grossbeat. For this, I like to make use of stutter presets and introduce things like pitch bends as well as reverses. But if you don't want to make your own Shaperbox presets, I recommend focusing on the rhythmic section and going through the chop and gate, the fills, and the stutter and repeat presets. Now, the second way I'll chop up my guitars is a little bit more laborious, but it can result in some really cool and unique sounds. And that's going to be using Fruity Slicer or some kind of slicing program. And I'm not going to go too deeply into chopping up the guitars with a slicer because I have a full-length video going over exactly how to do that. So if you want to know how to chop up your guitar samples using Fruity Slicer, go ahead and check it out in the top left or right. I don't remember which one's which. But yeah, that's literally every single tip that I have for making Midwest emo melodies. I wish somebody would have told me these things when I first started because everything that I have learned has been through trial and error. So I really hope that this helps you in your journey. But with that being said, I'm going to play our guitar melody in its entirety, and I'm going to show you a beat making use of one of my Midwest emo guitar loops just to show how it fits into that Brakence vibe. So this is what the guitar sample sounds like. And this is what a hand-played Midwest emo guitar loop sounds like in context with a Brakence type beat.
Masters of the Shadows.
So yeah, that's going to completely cover everything you need to know about making Midwest emo guitar loops in the style of Brakence. I know a lot of people have been asking for this tutorial, so I'm super glad to finally put it out. It just took me a little bit of time to compile all of my thoughts in one place. But yeah, I hope you learned something new and enjoyed the video. If you have any questions at all, throw them down in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. And yet again, thank you so much to Xvive Audio for supporting the channel and sending me my new favorite guitar toy. I heavily recommend checking out the A58 if you haven't already. It is actually a game changer. But yeah, other than that, consider subscribing as I post one tutorial a week and one sound kit a month. Other than that, it's gonna be it. Peace!